further softening his tone on India, with Ambassador designate Sergio Gore revealing that Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has been invited to Washington next week for trade talks. And in fact, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer Gore told the U.S. Senate that a hopeful trade deal is on the table, with only the finer details left to resolve, also expressing confidence that it could be finalized within weeks. U.S. markets surged to yet another high on Thursday, with all three major indices, the Dow, S&P 500 and Nasdaq, driven by growing market confidence in a Fed rate cut. The Dow Jones closed above 46,000 for the first time. There was, however, a little apprehension with consumer prices rising, the sharpest since January. Join Business Today TV as we go live with the press briefing on decisions of the SEBI board meeting this evening. Rules likely to be eased to attract foreign equity investors. Minimum IPO requirements for very large companies could also be relaxed. Several other market-moving items on the agenda. Infosys announces a record share buyback of 18,000 crore rupees. Board clears the proposal to purchase 10 crore shares at a price of 1,800 rupees, a premium of 19% to Thursday's close. If you are a shareholder, stick on. We'll tell you what this means for you. And Maruti all set to go beyond ethanol as a fuel mix in its cars. The company has revealed to Business Today TV that it will launch flex fuel vehicles before the end of this fiscal. The developing tech will allow the ethanol blend to go as high as 85%, far beyond the current 20%. Well, first up, let's listen in to what Sergio Gore, the U.S. ambassador designate to India, had to say about Trump inviting Piyush Goyal for trade talks next week.
We're actively negotiating with the Indians right now. In fact, the president has invited their commerce and their trade ministers to come visit us next week, and they'll be meeting with Ambassador Greer here in Washington. Part of that will include a hopeful deal. We're not that far apart right now on a deal. In fact, they're negotiating the nitty-gritty of a deal. Secondly, look, we hold our friends to a different standard. Frankly, we expect more from India than we do sometimes from other nations. I do think it will get resolved over the next few weeks. And finally, we commend you and the chairman. You're both co-sponsors of Senator Lindsey Graham's bill, which seeks to impose 500% tariffs. So the president has imposed 25% tariffs. The bill that almost every single member of this committee is a co-sponsor of goes much higher. So I think we're all in agreement on that.
All right, let's take a look at the market setup this morning. Clearly, some of that positive sentiment will continue to follow through, and especially as we count down to the Fed meet as well. Let's take a look at the setup overnight. Looking strong, especially across tech, and we saw a nice move on the Dow as well, above 46,000 for the first time, a record closing coming in there. Shell Bhatnagar also joining us this morning. Shell on the Nifty, we also had a close above 25,000 as we were anticipating, and a nice move across Wall Street and Asia overnight as well. What's the setup looking like for today?
Good morning, Aabha. I was hoping to have wished for something else yesterday. Remember, I had talked about a close above 25,000. Well, that's happened, and that's lovely. Thank God it's Friday. And let's hope that 25,143 is something which is a 4-week high. Now, if that is met, and we have a strong close above 25,100, that would be, as they say in Hindi, sone pe sohaga. But all good as far as markets are concerned. You have a strong close on Wall Street, a record high. You have a strong traction coming into auto stocks, PSU banking stocks, IT stocks. Therefore, next week looks really, really strong as far as markets are concerned. The breadth is strong, and the underlying momentum is now towards a record high as far as markets are concerned. Maybe somewhere closer to December this time.
All right, lots of action we're poised for there on Dalal Street this morning. Let me take you through some stocks and news as well. Keep an eye out on some of these. Infosys, of course, we've been tracking that big buyback news, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But the board has approved that 18,000 crore rupee buyback, and it's a 19% premium. Remember, 2.4% of equity, 19% of net worth. What does this mean for you? We'll come back and talk to Shell about that in a moment. Marico acquiring a balanced 46% stake in True Elements. investments. That's a 138 crore deal coming in for Marico. So that's another one that we'll track on opening this morning. GAIL planning to list its city gas distribution arm. So GAIL also in focus. Canara Bank, Canara Robeco AMC has got SEBI's nod to file an RHP. So we'll be eyeing that stock for you and some of the other banking names, PSU banks in particular. NBCC has signed an MOU with RICO for projects worth 3,700 crores in Rajasthan. And we've got Lodha Developers also in the news this morning. They've signed a 30,000 crore rupee MOU with the Maharashtra government for green integrated data and a green integrated data park that's going to be coming up there. So Lodha in the news again, and we'll keep an eye on some of those real estate majors. We'll pull them up a little while on the show. Mayuresh Joshi also joining us this morning. Mayuresh, I think the biggest newsmaker is the index itself, closing above 25,000 yesterday, and we're watching out for how that momentum really picks up, especially ahead of the Fed meet next week. What are you tracking, and what's the setup looking like for you?
Morning, Aabha. I think clearly the markets are going through this very long phase of consolidation based primarily on two factors. One, I think some element of resolution on what happens as far as the Trump tariffs, the additional 25% is concerned. The recent tweets are giving some hope for the markets that a resolution might be around the corner or some weeks down the line. And therefore, that is one element that the market is and the street is clearly watching out for. And the second aspect in terms of an earnings recovery based on both GST rationalization as well as the income tax cuts, which should largely now start playing out in the second half, along with the rural recovery that we've largely seen. Makes us believe as a base case scenario that Q3 onwards in the second half, earnings should start coming back. And earnings is the only supporting factor for the markets from a medium-term perspective. Yeah. So if they start coming back, my own sense is market should then probably get out of this slumber and the consolidation phase that we have probably.
All right. Mayuresh, I'll get into specific stocks just post-opening, but a quick call from you in terms of thematically what you're strong on right now. As you mentioned, some of those key factors at play. So we've seen focus, whether it be on auto, real estate, steel, cement, consumer. What are really you going with at this point of time?
So I think it's more domestic driven for the last few quarters. I think that the scenario will still continue. So autos obviously have done their bit in terms of price reactions as far as stocks are concerned. But auto ancillaries still remain actionable selectively because our take is that both the OEM and the replacement market with demand expected to surge, select auto ancillaries might continue doing well. Energy as a space, I think our take is the government initiatives that are probably happening on the energy vertical when it comes specifically to renewables. I think a part of that ecosystem, whether they're transmission players or otherwise, I think energy as a space selectively can continue doing well. Consumption is going to be a huge driver going forward. And within consumption itself, FMCG as a space will make a strong comeback in our opinion. Both volumes and value growth should start coming back explicitly as we start Q3. Within the sub-segments of consumption, footwear stock, domestic apparel makers, I think the risk reward there probably sounds far better as discretionary spending starts coming back. Healthcare selectively, hospitals is a space that we've continued liking, and our own sense looking at how numbers have played out in Q1. The strategies that hospital makers have deployed should largely also play out. And last but not the least, I think hotels as a space absolutely immune from what Trump is expected or might do. And therefore, I think hotels as a space might continue.
I just love the fact that there's so much to choose from, and especially in the broader markets as well. And that key theme really being the domestic story and how that's set to continue to boom. We're counting down now to open. Just a few ticks left on your screen. Remember to keep an eye on a whole host of these newsmakers as well as IT, auto, for example, some of these pockets of the market, financials. Let's take a look at how some of them do on opening bell. Let's pull up those ticks for you. A gap up 0.3% higher on the Nifty right now. We're trending at about just 0.2% on the Nifty Bank. Nifty IT, strong, solid opening coming in there as expected this morning. Auto index is also steady. So we're continuing to see a soft positive move coming in across the board there. Financials, auto. Let's pull up Infy for you as well and take a look at how that's doing. One of the top movers right now. IT is definitely looking strong. TCS also contributing to opening gains. Financials are looking good, or at least some of them selectively I can see on your screen right now. Access, for example. We've got other movers like an Asian Paint, some of the steel majors. On the downside, little bit of a weakness in some of those consumer plays, a marginal profit booking, even on cement, for example, ITC, HUL, Grasim, some of those names just seeing slightly softer moves this morning. Infy up close to 2% right now, and let's get deeper into that buyback as we speak. But once we just run through a few other movers in the broader market, let's take a look at some of those newsmakers, see if any action coming in there. We've got Bharat Forge also in the news on a particular deal. JBM Auto on some funding as well for continued expansion. So let's pull up some of those names and see if we've got any kind of action coming in on Lodha, Bharat Forge, Gale, some of the newsmakers this morning just to see. Yeah, JBM Auto. Ecolife Mobility has secured $100 million in IFC funding to deploy close to 1,500 electric buses. So that's the news coming in there on JBM, and that's why it's up about 6% right now. And we'll continue to fire some of those newsmakers for you as well, just to see what else is reacting as, in opening morning trade, early trade. Nifty Realty up about 0.5%. Of course, Lodha is the big newsmaker, but we'll see what else is moving the real estate index as well. VIX is down, which is always a good sign. We've got broader markets also very much intact this morning. Anything standing out to you, Cheryl?
Aabha, just one stock, which is Infosys, and the largest buyback ever, 18,000 crores at about 1,800 rupees, which is 19% higher. Remember, this is good for existing shareholders. There have been tweaks in the market laws governing buybacks as far as income tax is concerned. So if you are thinking of buying from the market at 1534 today and selling it to the company at 1800, well, there is always that slip between the cup and the lip. It's quite a battle for you. So please consult your CA on the new rules that govern these buybacks. I think Mayuresh should be better placed to answer them. Mayuresh, how easy is it to buy from the market, Infosys at 1537, sell it to the company at 1,800 rupees and pocket the difference?
No, I think it's not that simple, Shell. And therefore, I think what you're probably looking at is the buyback price has got announced. But how much of tendering happens at that price is something to be seen. So again, I think it's all good on paper, but when you probably try to execute that, it's not that simple.
What's your larger view on IT, Mayuresh? Because, while, of course, there have been other concerns and we've been seeing it lag somewhat for, larger fundamental macro factors. In terms of looking at them from an investment point of view, what is your take on IT right now?
No, so you are equal weight, Aabha. I think, and the reason why we are equal weight is based on the following rationale. One, I think in terms of expectations of the entire transition from a business perspective, you've seen platform makers get into Gen AI, Agentic AI. I think we are lagging behind. So I think there have to be accelerated investments by our IT majors into these spaces. Second, I think with accelerated investments, the resource training is equally important and the utilization of resources as well on the bench strength. And therefore, I think there will be a periodicity or a phase where this transition will probably happen. I think the typical outsourcing model might still work for a few quarters, but the margins might start coming off as more and more AI tools start getting deployed globally and by global companies which are deploying that. So in my own sense, again, companies which are more adept in terms of having these processes onboarded on a fast-track basis might continue to do well. And therefore, I think we remain extremely selective. Large caps, risk reward, attractive, but they might go to a periodicity of earnings softness, as I call it. Emphasis is the only stock that we continue holding in our global portfolios because the kind of portfolio performance that Emphasis probably carries on in its books, whether it comes to AI or Agentic AI, almost 60% of the book is probably geared towards that. And even more might come their way. Makes us believe that they might be probably one of those few companies which might adapt and adopt to these changes that are happening in the landscape.
Okay. Let's move the discussion to PSU banks for a moment because lots happening there. Shell, I know you have pulled up some data for us, especially on the background and the context when it comes to this, mega reform agenda that the government is, re-looking at once again with regards to a mega merger there with PSU banks. Talk us through what can be expected.
Well, Aabha, just about 2 years ago, we had somewhere like 26, 27 PSU banks that were merged into each other, and now we have about 14 left. Well, the government's view is that you should reduce this number to somewhere between a handful, say 5 or 6. Now, that will be very beneficial for the regulator because it needs to regulate less number of entities. As far as banks are concerned, they'll have better and stronger balance sheets. They can address India's infrastructural push a little better in terms of giving larger loans, as also the fact that a stronger balance sheet, better network will also improve the overall structure of the banking sector in India. Remember, we have the best banking setup in the world. Now, as far as the reason behind these is not far to guess. A reduced number of banks also means that you have less work as far as the finance ministry is concerned, as far as the regulator is concerned. And of course, we've seen the reduction in number has actually led to a better working outlook as far as banks are concerned. Their balance sheets are stronger. Aabha.
What are valuations looking like, Mayuresh? Let me bring you into the discussion as well when it comes to PSU banks.
Oh, valuations are extremely attractive. So I think if you probably peg how PSU banks are getting valued compared to their peers in the large cap space, valuations are obviously in favor of PSU banks. And again, I think the numbers for select PSU banks, Aabha, have really done well in the quarter gone by. It was a tough quarter with interest rates coming down. There was NIM compression. CASA deterioration was very, very evident on balance sheets. And the biggest challenge for banks as a sector is how deposit growth will probably improve in the coming few quarters with interest rates coming down and deposit rates actually coming down as well. PSU banks have those legacy deposits with them, those old accounts which have continued with them for years and years. And therefore, deposit growth should be reasonable enough compared to the rest of the pack. Again, I think a lot of commentaries suggest that recoveries and write-offs, which might be a little bit on the better side, better recoveries and lesser write-offs because of better control over risk-weighted assets and higher provisioning already carried on their balance sheet with inexpensive valuations. I think it's a deadly combination. So in my own sense, I think this quarter might be a reset quarter for banks. But banks like Bank of Maharashtra, fabulous set of numbers in the quarter gone by. Bank of Baroda, decent set of numbers as well.
That's super interesting, Mayuresh. And Shell, just so then looking at it from a retail investor perspective, one should perhaps be keeping an eye out on really what develops here.
Absolutely, Aabha. And one of the best ways to look at it, Mayuresh and I have often discussed it with many common analysts who are friends with us, is the Nippon India PSU banking ETF. It consists of 10 banks, and many of these PSU banks, Aabha, are below single-digit P. They are below 10. Remember, the Nifty itself is somewhere like 18, 19. And many of these good banks are trading at a P of 7, 8, 9. In fact, their price to book is below 2, which essentially means that they are way, way undervalued given their strength as far as decreasing NPAs are concerned, higher credit growth is concerned. This is something that a retail investor can look into. Forget which bank will come at the top. Let the government decide that. What you can happily do is look at the Nippon India PSU banking ETF and then take a position in that. Of course, please consult an independent financial advisor as well. This is an area which will really, really grow big as the economy moves from 4 trillion to 10 trillion over the next 2 decades or so. So the PSU banking setup is something to look at as far as good long-term gains are concerned. Aabha.
All right. Almost out of time, so just want to quickly touch upon one or two other updates. Urban Company Day 2 subscription was 9.5 times. So that's on Urban Company, while Dev Accelerator saw a subscription of about 16x on that one. And Shringar House of Mangal Sutra saw about an 8x subscription. So we're actually seeing close to all of these key IPOs this week. So that's the news on that front. And Maruti, let's pull up the auto major for you, has announced that it will launch its first flex fuel car by March 2026. This technology enables up to 85% ethanol blending in petrol. Let's quickly listen in to the management, and I'll get a closing call from Mayuresh on auto.
Number of models which will adapt to the flex fuel will increase. The first model we are going to announce in March next year, and then we will increase more models to follow.
Right. And how many products by next year would be expected flex fuel in India?
That we will announce a little bit later.
Mayuresh, I'm completely out of time, but just a quick comment from you on auto and whether you feel the current rally that we saw is done, or whether you're still a longer-term investor in this segment.
So I think the momentum might continue. I think automakers, you hear Maruti, you hear Hyundai, I think they were expecting negative volume growth, and now they're expecting positive volume growth in higher single digits. So I think it's going to be a massive transition as we speak. A lot of the price action has probably happened for these stocks, and therefore I think anybody holding these quality stocks should hold. But as I said, I think auto ancillaries selectively become a case to probability.
Great. Mayuresh, thanks so much for joining us. Shell, great to have you on the show as well. That's where we leave it this morning. But do stay tuned. We'll bring you all the action during market closing, including, of course, the build-up to the big SEBI meet. Do stay tuned.
Moto G96 5G. All eyes on you.
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए।
अरे ये क्या है?
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये घर की रक्षा के लिए।
न जले न पिघले, घर घर को सेफ बनाएं। अपार अनुशक्ति फायर प्रोटेक्ट वायर।
मंगलदीप, दिल से करो बात भगवान के साथ। मंगलदीप धूप कोन्स 2 गुनी खुशबू के साथ दे पूजा का बेहतर अनुभव।
How is he always winning?
Moto G96 5G.
All eyes on you.
Hello, Moto.